Hello everybody, and welcome to the Chrono Trigger review Addendum. Basically what this video is going to be is me going a little bit deeper into Chrono Trigger than I did in the actual review, and going over a lot of things that I cut out of the review. When I originally wrote it, it was actually the longest by far that I've ever written. It was on pace to be an hour or longer in terms of its final video length. So I ended up cutting more than half of my review out in order to make it fit into something that would be below 30 minutes. So there's a lot of that stuff I want to go over, as well as maybe directly address a few of your comments that I saw on the video and go a little bit deeper into kind of what my thought process was for this. So let's get started here. I actually had 3 different intros that up until the night before I uploaded, I was battling which one I should go with. The one that ended up going in, the one that you actually saw, was the more emotional introduction and concluding paragraph that sort of based the thesis of the essay on how this affected me personally. Obviously, I was still more analytically minded throughout in explaining how the game works and in including some criticisms that other players have of the game. But the one I ended up going with was much more centered on my personal feelings, how this game inspired me to do what I felt was right in terms of my career choices and my path in life versus what others were telling me was right. I'm very glad that you guys received that well. I was very worried, even up until after it had been uploaded, that it was too personal and that those who had not seen the channel before, so you guys that are fans of us, I could see, that you might receive it well, that you would like to have that background on my life. But other people who were discovering the channel, I was afraid that they would want to click away too quickly, because it's like, I came here to watch Chrono Trigger, not some guy's personal sob life story, you know what I mean? So I was really worried about that, but it seems so far that people have responded well to that, and so I'm really glad I ended up making that choice. But I had 2 other basically versions of introducing this, and one was a lot more analytical. It started off immediately talking about Chrono Trigger, and rather than talking about myself, and that was the one that I almost went with instead. But let's see, I have that version here. In fact, I actually have the audio of that version. Maybe I should just play that, or maybe not. No, let's just read it. Yeah, so it was a lot shorter too, so I was able to really quickly get into the review. But this one reads, due to the monumental success of Final Fantasy, Square's fortunes had been reversed as they entered the 1990s. With a secure future and a hit franchise leading as their flagship, it became possible to expand the company's arsenal and experiment with new ideas. Many great RPGs were born as a result of this newly found flexibility, but the most renowned of these is without a doubt Chrono Trigger. As the birth child of Hironobu Sakaguchi and Yuji Horii, it was referred to internally as the Dream Project, and combined 2 of the most prolific RPGs to come out of Japan, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, into one stunning package. Released in March of 1995 on the Super Nintendo, I didn't actually get to play it for the first time until it was re-released on the Nintendo DS in 2008, and it could not have come into my life at a more perfect time. And then the last 2 sentences there really briefly summarize how it affected me. But that one was a lot more centered on the game itself. And up until the very end, I was tempted to go with that, because it was a little shorter, and it started out immediately talking about Chrono Trigger instead of talking about me, which I thought would be more appealing for new viewers. However, it did not have the same impact as the version that I ended up going with, and so as just a gut feeling, I ended up going with that version instead. So whether or not that was a mistake overall, I guess is yet to be seen, but you guys seem to really enjoy the version I went with, and that's nice. I had another version that I was writing where the thesis was a bit more philosophical, and probably could be considered more speculative. Those of you who participated in the discussion videos that I did will know that I had a conversation with a viewer about how the time travel aspect itself might have been a big reason why the game is so well beloved. In fact, there are many games that are about, or that at least feature time travel in them that are considered to be some of the greatest games of all time. These games are so highly regarded, and we were speculating whether or not that might have had something to do with the fact that it was time travel itself. That got into a deeper discussion about how, written words, art, symbols, these things in a sort of obscure way, they immortalize us. We can create records of our lives that can be preserved and studied and appreciated by the generations that come after us. And there's something about that I feel is very appealing, just in a primordial way, to human beings. Being able to see your footprint on the world throughout time, I think, is something that just instinctually speaks to human beings. And so my original thesis I was writing was kind of driving on that point, about how that could have affected why this has had such a profound effect on people. But in the end, I felt like that was a little too philosophical, a little too focused on speculation about what the meaning could be. And based on some of the feedback that Landon received on his Dark Souls Lost in Translation video, where people really felt he was speculating some hidden meanings, I decided not to go that direction and instead go the way that I ended up going. So let's get into some paragraphs that I just cut altogether from the review. Here, I had a whole paragraph here at the beginning talking about how I admired Hironobu Sakaguchi because of his dedication to challenging himself and the industry. And we saw that a little bit in the Final Fantasy 15 Uncovered event. He talked about his, and in interviews as well, he's talked about his conversations with the director of Final Fantasy 15, telling him it's all about challenging yourself. You've got to get back to doing something that challenges you, that challenges the team, that, innovating, changing challenging what people's expectations are. And that's something about him that like I said, I really admire. And you could see that mindset all over Chrono Trigger. And so I had a whole section there kind of talking about that. But in the end, I felt like the beginning of the video was just dragging out too long. I really needed to get more into discussing the game and analyzing itself. So I ended up cutting that section there. But there was a whole section about the challenger roots that they talk about whenever they have discussions with Hironobu Sakaguchi or Tabata about the creation of Final Fantasy 15, getting back to those roots of challenging yourself. And I feel like because they were doing that in this time especially, that's how they were able to create so many games that are all considered to be the greatest of all time. Not like the greatest, but among the greatest of all time. Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, even Final Fantasy VIII by a subgroup of people really feel like it should be considered one of the best. Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. It's like an endless list of just unbelievably good RPGs, and I feel like that was a result of his mindset. So that section there ended up getting cut. Down the line here a little bit, there was a whole section here. I had been talking about the dragon tank on the Guardia Castle dungeon, that scene, how it has this sharp contrast in tone from really serious to humorous. And there was a quote from Sakaguchi from an interview where he said that there were times that he felt under pressure to make as much of a Toriyama style world as possible. Sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit. But contrary to my expectations, I found that it was okay to play around in Toriyama's universe. It felt like anything was possible. And he was expressing some concern about balancing that serious side and that humorous side. But that in the end, they really felt like they could do both. They really felt like they could experiment and do, both the humorous side and the serious side and balance that together. And they just kind of had fun with it. They didn't end up stressing as much about it as maybe they would have expected to. And I can really feel that in the final game. It's a game that just kind of flows, and it's not ever taking itself too seriously. It's never too silly. It's just like what's right for the moment is there, and it's kind of just organic in a way. It doesn't feel like somebody was struggling to manipulate the right feeling. It just kind of like flowed, and it seems that that's what they felt when they were developing it as well. That they just kind of went with the flow, and it came to them, and I found that very interesting. Down here, we have a whole bunch of paragraphs, almost an entire page here that I removed. And this, let's just kind of go through here and see what I was talking about. All of this, of course, is not to say that the game is entirely devoid of customization, as there are several hidden stat-boosting items. Okay, so there I was talking about the capsules. So I wanted to delve a little bit further into the fact, because I had talked about how this game kind of locks you into classes with the magic affinities. But I was trying to give a counterpoint to that, saying that there is some amount of customization there with the capsules. You can get the strength capsules, speed capsules, magic capsules. They're called tabs in the SNES version. And you can give those to specific characters and take them from what would have been like an obvious melee path into a pretty solid magic path. So that's there, but I don't think you can really... Since a lot of them are hidden really well, you can't really expect people to obtain all of those and know how to use them in order to really customize their characters on a first playthrough, perhaps. Not without a lot of time and experimentation and just getting lucky and finding all of the tabs. But there is customization there if you really want it for veteran players. So I kind of had that point that I made. I also had a whole paragraph here talking about the 3-party system, which I eventually just decided, all of this stuff is really getting into, like, extreme detail and just kind of nitpickiness on a very small aspect of the game. It doesn't affect sort of the larger picture, and so that's why I kind of decided to cut it. But I talked about how, in this game, the 3-party system didn't bother me as much as it did in Final Fantasy 7 and 8. Where customization was such a large focus in those games, customizing the characters and their abilities. In those games, it was sort of meaningless which characters you brought into the party, because all you had to do was swap the materia or swap the junctions, and they could fulfill the same roles. Whereas in this game, it's not quite the same. In this game, because of the magic affinities, because some characters are much better at melee than others, and others are better at magic, it does matter which character you bring with you. And so I still felt like selecting characters was important, and that's perhaps why it didn't bother me quite as much in this case that there were only 3 in the active party. But they do have a pretty silly explanation for why you can only carry 3, and I didn't end up putting that in the review, but it is a little bit of a ham-fisted, like, hey, for no reason whatsoever, you can only have 3 guys in your party. Talked about equipment setups a little bit here, how, it's not quite as robust as it was in Final Fantasy VI, but there are still many instances where I went with equipment that wasn't necessarily the strongest physical defense or strongest magic defense, in order to have fire resistance, or in order to have resistances to certain status ailments like Confuse. So there was a little bit more strategy with the equipment setups in this game than there were in Final Fantasy 7 and 8, and I did like that quite a bit. So there was a whole section there that I cut out. Then I had here about 3 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs here with a little bit of a story summary. And the reason I ended up cutting that is because, first of all, we actually have plans here in August to really delve even deeper into the games that we cover on the channel. And that's going to involve videos that are dedicated to story analysis. So because of that, because I know that that's on the horizon, I know that I will cover this game's story in depth in the future. So I figured, I might as well keep these reviews spoiler-free, completely spoiler-free, so that anybody can watch them safely, and just remove any sort of discussion about the story. But then know that soon, in the future, I will cover the story in depth. So that kind of helped the review to flow a little better. It felt like it was getting caught or dragging a bit in this section. So I cut that out entirely, but I do plan on making an entire video just dedicated to that in the future. Another paragraph here that I cut. I also love the idea that the 3 central characters who come from a time of peace and prosperity make the decision to jump in and do whatever they can to help suffering people across time, despite the fact that their actions will likely have no significant effect on their own prospects for a prosperous life in their own time. I ended up cutting this paragraph. There's a little bit more to that, but that's something I've always felt that I thought was really unique to this game, was that the characters themselves are not driven by any immediate motivation in their own time period. Because in their time period, everything's at peace. And, everything that's coming, that's going to devastate the people of the future, anything that happened in the past, it doesn't necessarily affect them. They don't have to jump in and get involved if they don't want to. But they do anyways, because they care about people. And they want to make a better future for their descendants. And, they want to help the people, their ancestors. So that it's just a show, I think, and maybe an extension of the player character as part of Yuji Horii sort of philosophy of character development, especially for the player avatar. The player is actively invested in helping the people in the world and wanting to do something to make a difference, despite the fact that it has no direct effect on me. Because I think people, for the most part, are inherently good. They want to help others that are suffering. We have sympathy for people. So I thought that was a really interesting take, a very unique take, something you don't see very often. Usually in stories like this, you have a direct motivation where the person's own life is at risk, someone the person cares about's life is at risk, their home is at risk, whether it's their village or their city or whatever, and they're doing something to save people they love. And in this case, it's like, that's not really the case. They're just doing it because they're genuinely good people, and I thought that was very interesting. Okay, so I had a lot more regarding Yasunori Mitsuda that I actually didn't include in the review. And it was really interesting to me. If you read some of his interviews right after Chrono Trigger was being released or leading up to the release, you could see how bitter he was. How awful the experience was in terms of the effect on his health, and how much just heart and soul he put into it, and how he felt very little reward for all that hard work, which is just an enormous shame. If he, and I'm sure he understands this now that it's been out for so many years and people love his work, but it's just a shame that he felt that way. After creating such a brilliant soundtrack, he felt like he put all that work into it and didn't get much from it. I had a whole section here where it was talking about how Sakaguchi let him know your pay might go up if you do a good job on Chrono Trigger. And the interviewer actually asks him, so did your salary increase? And he says, only a little. So they didn't pay him very much, even after that, after all they had been through. And there was even a part of one of the Sakaguchi interviews I was reading where he said, they were asking him if there was anything you regretted about the development cycle or anything you would have changed. And his response was, if we had worked a little bit harder, I would have really liked to have hit the original release date. And I'm sitting here going, you had your composer driving himself nearly to death. He worked and worked and worked as hard as possible. He could not have pushed himself any harder. And that's the response you're going to give. If we had just worked a little harder, we could have hit our release date. I don't know. That really rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm sure it rubbed him the wrong way. And I can really sympathize with him, but he was so bitter. There was one interview where they were talking about a possible sequel, and he was like, oh, a sequel? I don't know if they're working on that, but I don't want to do it. He just, like, was not interested at all. And even some of the people, you know, some of the other developers he was in the interview with were trying to, like, supplement his answers and say, oh, people really love your work so far, and he just seemed to be very dismissive about it. I'll put a link in the description to the interview I'm talking about, but it just made me really sad. He really just put absolutely everything he had into creating the music for this. He felt like it was his this great opportunity, his first chance to really be a composer, and he created something that is timeless, that will stay with me for the rest of my life, that is very emotionally impactful and was worthy of him, worthy of the fame that he's received, you know, afterwards. It's a shame that he hasn't gone on to do very much since then. I mean, he left Square after doing Xenogears and Chrono Cross, and kind of has been doing his own thing since then. He hasn't done a lot of big projects. And I don't know. I really wish he had been able to receive the same renown as Nobuo Uematsu, and I think he deserves it. I think he's talented enough to be on that level. But maybe it just took too much out of him. I don't know. But anyways, there are a bunch of interviews he has where he kind of talks about his experience, and it was really sad to see how bitter he was initially. Okay, so that covers a lot of sort of the major things that I cut from the review, some of the things I wasn't able to include. Let me know what you guys think about that, but let's go ahead and respond to just one or two of your comments real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. One of them that I really wanted to respond to was from Green Hat Hero, and his first paragraphs, you know, goes on to say, excellent work, I really liked this, this, and this, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you very much coming out and giving your compliments. I'm glad that you appreciated all the hard work I put into it. He goes on to give a small criticism. I think you may have been a little too self-conscious about including dissenting opinions in this one because of how attached you are to the game. And I feel the frequent asides in this regard took me out of the review a bit and hurt the flow just a little. And I feel like this is something that I can't please everyone. And that's very hard for me to accept. I have always been, even within like the role I play within my family, I am the pleaser. I am the mediator. I have always taken it upon myself to try and make everyone around me happy, and so it's been a very hard lesson as I've started making YouTube videos for a living. It's been a very hard lesson for me, but one that I have been forced to accept, is that I cannot please everyone. No matter what direction I decide to go, no matter how much of a consensus I may have for that decision, no matter how democratic I am and transparent I am with the audience and allowing them to participate and have a voice in the direction I go, I am never going to please everyone. In this regard, this is something that I feel very strongly about. And this comes after doing reviews for so many years on YouTube, and from the feedback that I've received from people. The very first version of the Final Fantasy VIII review that I put up was entirely from my own point of view, my own perspective. I was not inclusive of what anyone else thought whatsoever. And the result of that was that it was the most disliked of all of my Final Fantasy reviews. And I had a lot of people coming into the comments who were unhappy with my analysis, obviously. And there's nothing wrong with disagreeing, but there was just kind of this vehement voice, this very aggressive way in which they thought that I had entirely missed the whole point, that my analysis was terrible, and they were wrong. I wasn't wrong in my analysis. My analysis wasn't bad. It was just that they disagreed. And that's how people react when they disagree. And, that's why I made that whole video on cognitive bias back at the beginning of the year, trying to introduce people to the idea of confirmation bias and in-group favoritism and those sorts of things. But I realized something after doing those reviews, is that it's important. It's important when trying to be objective, which I always try to be. I always try to be open-minded, that you be inclusive of other perspectives. And at least, because this is how I see my reviews. My reviews are not my opinion, strictly and only. It's not just me telling you what I think. I don't want it to ever be that. I don't want my videos to be about me. I want my videos to be a service to the people who watch. And I believe strongly that in order to do that fairly and honestly, that my reviews should be giving you multiple perspectives on something and allowing you to make the choice of where you fall. Do you think this way? Do you think this way? Am I this kind of player or this kind of player? Would I like this or would I like that? And you can get the sense, regardless of what I feel, because I'm going to give my personal opinion, but regardless of what that is, I'm not persuading you one way or the other. I'm letting you know what I think, and I'm letting you know what some other people think. And you get to choose where you fall. You get to choose what you think. That is an element that I don't see in a lot of modern reviews. Because I think that once people get a platform, they like to make their own opinion more important than it actually is. They like to elevate themselves and elevate their opinions. And I never want to do that. I never want to elevate my own opinion. I want to offer it to see what you think, but I want to offer alternate opinions as well, so that you get to choose. It's in your hands, not mine. And so that it doesn't feel like I'm telling you what to think. It doesn't sound like I'm, forcing my opinion down your throat. I never, ever want to do that. And so that's why my reviews have become more open to dissenting opinions. I'm not doing it because I'm self-conscious, as you've written here. I'm not doing it because of a reason like that. The reason I'm doing it is for you. It's for you who are watching. I want you to know what the different perspectives are, and for you to choose where you fall. So, if you feel like it hurts the pace of the videos, I think that's a valid concern. I think that is, there are some people who just want to hear what my opinion is, but that's not my goal. And so because it's not my goal, that's just not the direction I'm going with the reviews. And so I apologize for that if you feel like that's a misstep. But I feel very strongly about it, and so that's how I'm going to continue to structure these. I've been kind of going on and on for a while. I don't want this video to be too long, so I think I will stop there. Anyways, those were some of the topics that I had to cut from the review. Would have been nice to be able to include all of my thoughts in one place, but would have just made the video way too long. So hopefully you guys are happy with it. It seems that you are, from the responses that I'm receiving. And let me know what you think about some of these other things that I didn't go over, that I included in this video. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I love discussing these games with you. We have some of the most intelligent, just coolest, chillest guys on the internet here in this community. And I love talking with you guys about this stuff. I feel like it's a total escape from a lot of forums where people are really angry with each other. They fight about stupid stuff, and I almost see none of that here, and I love that. And I feel like I finally found a gaming community that I can feel like I'm a part of, where I feel like I belong. And it's because of you guys. I appreciate very much all the support that you give us. Thank you. And I'll see you again soon.